Welcome students to Chapter 17. We are talking about disorders of aging and cognition in this chapter. And old age is a particularly stressful time for many people. It's usually defined in our society as the years past age 65, and that applies right now to 52 million people in our country. That number is growing, and older women outnumber older men by 5 to 4. There are unique upsets and profound biological changes in addition to the stressors of old age. You can see that the older population is climbing dramatically. It was 4% in 1900. It's expected to be 23% or 95 million by 2060. The psychological problems of elderly people may be divided into two groups. And the first one is disorders common in people of all ages, but are connected to the process of aging. And those include depression, anxiety, and substance use. And then there are disorders of cognition that result from brain abnormalities. These include delirium, mild neurocognitive disorders, and major neurocognitive disorders. The pressures of old age and their impact on elderly persons often intensify during times of community-wide stress, such as COVID-19, when many people, for example, in nursing homes had to be quarantined. Depression is one of the most common mental health problems of older adults. There are the same features for elderly people as for younger people. As many as 20% of people experience this disorder at some point during old age. The rate is highest in older women, and it raises the chances of developing medical problems. Around 1% of people over 65 display bipolar disorder, and 70% of onset is before old age. Anxiety is likewise common among the elderly. At any given time, about 10% of elderly men and women have an anxiety disorder. A generalized anxiety disorder is particularly common, experienced by up to 7% of all elderly persons, and the prevalence increases throughout old age. There's lots of things about aging that make people anxious, including declining health. Also, there's losses. There are specific events that are disturbing. And older adults are treated with psychotherapy of various kinds, especially cognitive behavioral therapy. Many also receive anti-anxiety medications, but they can produce cognitive problems, so they have to be used cautiously in older people. Substance misuse is not uncommon in later life. In addition to alcohol use, a leading kind of substance abuse in the elderly is the misuse of prescription drugs. Another drug-related problem is misuse of powerful medications at nursing homes. Elderly people have a higher rate of psychotic symptoms than young persons. Their symptoms are usually due to underlying medical conditions such as neurocognitive disorders. However, some people do have schizophrenia or delusional disorder in old age. It is less common, though, in older persons than younger ones. If you do have schizophrenia, the symptoms often lessen in later life, and antipsychotic drugs and psychotherapeutic interventions often continue from earlier life. Delusional disorder increases in the elderly population, and that's where you have false but not bizarre beliefs. There's deeply held persecution suspicions that may be due to hearing deficiencies, social isolation, greater stress, or heightened poverty. We also have disorders of cognition. Cognitive mishaps, such as leaving without your keys or forgetting someone's name, are common and normal features of stress or aging. As people do move through middle age, these memory difficulties and lapses of attention increase, and they may occur regularly by age 60 or 70. Sometimes people experience far more extensive and problematic memory and other cognitive changes. Cognitive problems more often have organic roots, particularly when they appear in later life. Leading cognitive disorders include delirium and major and mild neurocognitive disorders. Delirium is a major disturbance in attention and orientation to the environment. With diminishing awareness, the individual has great difficulty concentrating, focusing attention, and thinking sequentially, which can lead to misinterpretations, illusions, and on occasion, hallucinations. This does occur in any age group, including children, but it's most commonly found in elderly. It affects fewer than 0.5% of the non-elderly population, 1% of people older than 55, and 14% of those older than 85. People with neurocognitive disorder experience decline in at least one and often more than one area of cognitive functioning. These include things like memory, attention, visual perception, planning and decision-making, language ability, or social awareness, and there are changes in personality and behavior. Major and mild neurocognitive disorders are those in which there's a decline in cognitive functioning. In major neurocognitive disorder, it's substantial and it interferes with independence. In the mild form, it's modest and it doesn't interfere with independence. Alzheimer's disease is the most common and arguably frightening form of neurocognitive disorder, accounting for as many as 2/3 of all cases. Approximately 5.8 million people in the U.S. currently have the disease. Gradual progression sometimes appears in middle age, which is called early onset, but it most often occurs after the age of 65, which is late onset. The prevalence increases markedly among people in the late 70s and early 80s, and there are gender and ethnic differences. There's a lot of different brain structure and circuitry issues related to Alzheimer's disease, and I'll only touch on a little bit of what we know. There may be multiple genetic causes triggering the numerous tangles that we see in the brains of Alzheimer's patients upon autopsy and the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Genes that start the ball rolling by first promoting these beta amyloid protein formations and plaques are being identified, and then there are gene forms that are more directly promoting tau protein abnormalities and tangle formations. You can see a normal brain in these brain scans at the top of the black box, and then at the bottom of the black box you can see a brain with Alzheimer's disease. So you can see a lot of different types of functioning with different heightened areas of stimulation and also decreased size of the brain. The human brain has two memory systems that work together to aid learning and recall, and they're implicated in the circuitry related to Alzheimer's disease. We have short-term or working memory that gathers new information, and we have to be able to hold this information in short-term memory to be consolidated into long-term memory. Long-term memory is the accumulation of information that we have stored over many years, and remembering information stored in long-term memory is called retrieval. Certain brain structures seem to be especially important in memory, and these include the prefrontal lobes, the temporal lobes, and the diencephalon. And research indicates that cases of dementia involve damage to or improper functioning of one or more of these areas. There are several chemicals, such as acetylcholine, glutamate, RNA, and calcium, that are responsible for the production of proteins in key cells when new information is acquired or stored. And we know that if the activity of these chemicals is disturbed, the proper production of proteins may be prevented and the formation of memories interrupted. Other possible explanations for Alzheimer's disease, including certain substances found in nature such as zinc that can produce brain toxicity, or the environmental toxin lead. There's an autoimmune theory that aging brain cells trigger an autoimmune response that leads to the disease. Also viral theory, because Alzheimer's resembles Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a form of dementia caused by a virus. Some researchers believe that a similar virus may be involved in Alzheimer's. The most effective interventions for Alzheimer's disease are to help prevent problems, to apply the interventions early, and it's essential to have tools that identify the disorder as early as possible, including neuropsychological testing. Vascular neurocognitive disorders are another variant of neurocognitive disorders. These may follow a cerebrovascular event or stroke, during which blood flow to specific areas of the brain is cut off with resultant damage. There's progressive damage, but symptoms begin suddenly rather than gradually. And you can see these 4 types of diseases have this type of progression. Other potential neurocognitive disorder causes include HIV infections, traumatic brain injury, substance abuse, and various medical conditions such as meningitis or advanced syphilis. Drugs currently prescribed affect neurotransmitters known to play an important role in memory. They have limited benefits, sometimes a high risk of harmful side effects. FDA approval, most effective in early and mild stages. Vitamin E and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are also in this category. In terms of strategies that focus on helping adults with neurocognitive disorders, cognitive behavioral strategies are useful in preventing and managing the disease as opposed to the cognition. Physical exercise and behavior-focused interventions of a different kind can be used. And then sociocultural approaches play an important role in treatment. There are specialized daycare programs for outpatients, assisted living facilities, and then there are practical devices like tracking beacons and shoes with GPS trackers that help make sure that we don't lose adults who are wandering. And this concludes my comments on Chapter 17, and we will pick up our conversation with Chapter 18.